Statutory valuations, Module 2. Statutory valuations are carried out strictly in accordance with the provisions of an enabling law. That means that there must be a law that has brought statutory valuation into life. And that law stipulates how the valuation will be done. The valuer has no input there other than to interpret the law relating to the valuation. And you have so many examples of them. The rent control is there, will lease is there, probate is there, compensation is also there, and the various laws of taxation that you have. Rent controls for residential property started in between USA and France as an aftermath of the First World War in about 1946. Nigeria is now no exception to this control. We started off with the Rent Control Ordinance of 1946, Rent Control Decree of 1966, and the various rent edits in the states. In Lagos, for example, we have had rent control edits 1970, 1973, 1976, 1997, and the latest one by Fashola, I think, was in 2011. So we have had various rent controls. The rent control is the fixing of statutory rents in respect of classified residential properties. Now let's examine reasons for rent control. When there is shortage of accommodation and consequently exorbitant rent, and that puts the tenant in most cases in a very difficult situation. So the government tries to fix the rent at a starting standardized level by zoning the entire areas, putting the area into zones, and just desktop fixing of rent. And sometimes the greed of the landlord is also part of the reasons why the government comes in as controller of rents to standardize the rents. It has some merits and demerits, but I leave it to your class, to the other class that takes I can't remember the name of the course now. There's a course that is particularly involved in this, so I let you go through that. Then it's exactly the same thing, no difference at all. For deeper understanding of rent control edits, students are advised to read the Rent Control and Recovery of Residential Premises Edit number 6 of 1997, and the Landlord and Tenant Law 2011. That was the one done by Fashola. This will be very, very helpful for this course, for this module. Those are the major laws I want you to read so that you can follow up quickly and know more details about this. But we are majorly concerned about the valuation aspect. But it is not a bad idea, if you obtain the rent control edit and the landlord and tenant law edit and study at your own leisure. And that will complement even your performance in the other course that I mentioned before. On the effect of legislation on the income method, which we use often in value, the investment method, income capitalizing method, let me just put it like that. Usually it has been assumed that the landlord and tenant are free from the amount of rent to be fixed for the premises, and the landlord can obtain vacant possession at the termination of the current lease. This may be acceptable in a free market, but where government intervenes, it may no longer be acceptable. However, in practice, there are legislations which interfere with freedom of bargain between both parties, that is the landlord and the tenant. These legislations, however, end up in enhancing the security of tenure to the tenant as far as the tenant is concerned, controls the rent payable, give the tenant a new lease after the term of the existing one, afford compensation to the extent where he has carried out some improvement works on the property. Landlord and tenant legislation include rent control edit, as we have said before, and it affects our investment method of valuation. They amend the normal law of contract as between landlord and tenant. They also affect the quanta of rent and duration of the term. One thing worthy of note is that the valuer, when valuing for investment purposes, must have regard to the statutory and legislative provisions applicable to the property in question. That is, when you as a valuer called upon to value premises under the rent control edit, you must not use the normal market. If you use the normal market valuation without recourse to the provision of the law, that valuation can be termed to be illegal, because you must reflect the law in your valuation, and you have no right to tamper with the law just for the sake of valuation. The effect of rent control is to restrict the income of a property to a level gradually lower than the market equivalent. That must be understood. Where the restriction is accompanied by security of tenure, the control rent becomes secure as an income. No doubt about that. If the standard rent fixed by the government is lower than the market rent, there's some form of security there in terms of the ability of the tenant to pay. Then, in the capitalization of the rent control income, it follows that the capitalization rate be reduced, say by half to 2.5%, just to reflect that security. That has been our normal practice in valuation. For further reading on this topic, you may see Fedora page 412 if you have access to that. But that is the main issue. The main issues are here. The main issues that affect the methodology here is to restrict the income to a level that is lower than the market rate. And when the restriction is accompanied by the security of income, the control rent becomes secure as an income to the investor. Then the capitalization too, you must reflect the security in the capitalization. Now there is a worked example which try to address the variances between valuing from the market point of view and from the rent control point of view. Now, this example attempts to elicit the two valuations just to show that there are differences in the value that you arrived at. So, first, if you use the rent control income, the valuation figure will be lower than if you adopt the market rent. So, the duty of the valuer is to reflect the capital value of the property. That's the duty. He cannot do this just like that because it might be infringing on the law. Now, if he adopts the market rent, it might be infringing on the law if he adopts the market rent. And if he is trying to use the rent control income, he arrives at a very low value that is below what the market can accept, can absorb. Let me put it that way. Therefore, he's not doing justice to his profession. So, he must try to strike a balance. But first, let me show you the difference. This example shows that there is a wide difference between valuing according to the rent control, the statutory valuation, and adopting the market rent, which in any case is what is operating, because there are a lot of under the table deals, black market deals, that no tenant actually pays the standard rent, and your valuation is supposed to reflect what the market is saying. You know, the market actually is saying and talking about the market rent or market value. the rent control is virtually ineffective over the years, and the capital value cannot be said to be reliable. So let's look at this example. You see, one, when you value through the rent control, you arrive at a rent, just normal valuation. You arrive at 99,000. So the capital value is 99,000. When you use your rent control and you sort of bring down the rate of interest just to reflect the security and all that, you arrive at 99,000. And when you adopt the market rent, you see that the value will go up to 452,800. The major observations here are that, one, there is substantial difference between the two values, as I have said before, as I have preempted before. After adjustment the rate percent for the security of the controlled income. Also, the use of the percentage of rent for outgoings in the control rent may create inadequate allowance for outgoings. You can see outgoings like 29,400 in case of the adopted rent, and it's just, what is it here? It's just 7,620 in the case of the rent control. So the landlord will probably do less if it's allowed 7,600 than when the allowance can go up to 29,000. So that will have an effect even on the maintenance of that property, and that can even affect the capital value, because it shows that it is possible. The possibility of under maintenance is very real when you are using the rent control. But by and large, what this shows is just that there's a wide difference. 99,600 is not anywhere near 452,800. And if you are not careful, the valuer misrepresents the interpretation or misinterprets the market and misadvises his client. So it needs some carefulness here and caution here too. So how does the valuer wriggle out of a problem like this when you have wide variances in two valuations because of not wanting to follow the law, so to speak, and at the same time trying to balance it with what the market says? Whatever it is, the property market is a very sensitive market, and you cannot be seen to be interpreting what is far below or what is far above what the market dictates. So the valuers have come to the use of security factor just to be able to comply with the two extremes, and the solution lies in the use of the security factor that measures the relationship between the control rent and the market rent. The idea is to escape the law, at the same time conform with the dictates of the market as to interpreting the capital value of properties or rental value of properties, as the case may be. Security factors allows you the use of rent stipulated by the law, so you escape an unlawful practice while reflecting the market situation. At the same time, we are also interpreting the market. In the above example, if you look back, you will see that you can derive a security factor, and that security factor, take the profit rent, of 52,600, which is for the second valuation, and the profit rent of the first, which is 90,580. Divide it and you get a security factor of 5.9. That is how the security factor is derived. Security factor allows the use of the rents stipulated by law. So you can now use the rent stipulated by law while you are reflecting the market situation, because the security factor is reflective of the market situation. So look at the valuation of the control rent. Profit rent is 9,580, which shows that you are complied with the law. That's the standard rent dictated. So as in the valuation above, YP 75 years, tax at whatever, you may allow for tax. 75 years is long enough. You may also regard as in perpetuity, but for the sake of this example, YP 7511, the security is a bit high now because you are trying an experiment. You are trying to work out an experiment, so to speak. Then you allow for 3%, which is you still regard the tenant as a lessee. So 3% sinking fund at 40 tax. Then security factor will be 5.49. That's 52,600 divided by 9,580, 5.29. YP adjusted for security of control rent will be 47.269. And when you multiply that by the profit rent, you still come to 452,800. This agrees with the 452,800 you arrived at by using the open market rent. So you are still using the open market rent, but while at the same time you are complying with the provisions of the law. So you are still in order. So that's the way that the valuers have been able to solve that problem, and that's the way the institution wants it to be done. It makes a lot of sense to me anyway. Otherwise, we'll be undervaluing properties and be discounting. And if you undervalue properties, then means we are trying to deplete the existing stock, because investors can no longer find it viable to carry out repairs. As a result, may run down the premises. It's possible. So it's better to just conform with the law and conform with market trends, which cannot be bypassed. So if we conform with the law alone, then the effect will be made worse. There will be shortage of supply of suitable accommodation, because investors will not be encouraged to go into that kind of investment. And also the black market deal will still continue unabated. Negotiations are always to higher prices, since no preference is made to the market for the determination of rent in the first place. So it continues. Under the market deal, you cannot, because there is shortage of supply, there is nothing you can do about it. So the NIVS justifies this, and this is what should be used.